All right, now we're going to switch gears. The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to pass a sprawling immigration overhaul bill by the end of the week. That sets the stage for a full Senate debate in early June. Joining me now exclusively, we welcome back Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, welcome, as always. But before we get to the immigration issue, I just want to ask you, I want to go a little bit far afield. I want to ask you if you believe a special counsel will be necessary to get to the bottom of the IRS rat's nest. I know you've talked a lot about the IRS, and I want to ask you, secondly, sir, do you think the White House had any involvement in targeting the Tea Party and other conservative groups?
So three separate parts to that. The first is we need to get to the bottom of what happened, and I think there's bipartisan support for that. The special counsel is something we should consider, and I've been thinking about that myself. There are downsides to a special counsel as well, and that have borne out in history. They've been misused in the past. As recently as in the Bush administration, against the Bush administration. That being said, it may be necessary here, particularly if we don't have any confidence in the Justice Department's ability to get to the bottom of what happened here. As far as your question about the White House's involvement, well, that's what we want to know. That's exactly the question that we want an answer to. I think what's troubling, I'm not prepared to say the White House is directly involved, but I think what's troubling is that every single day, the timeline continues to move in terms of who knew what at the White House. And every single day, it gets more and more troubling in terms of who knew what and when. So that's exactly the kinds of questions we need to be answering. Having answered, an IRS official tomorrow, I understand, is going to plead the fifth in a testimony before the House. But look, here's the bottom line. And I would say this is really not a Republican or a Democratic issue. This is a fundamental issue about whether the government of the United States should be targeting citizens because of their political affiliations, using perhaps its scariest agency of all, the IRS, to do it. And by the way, a reminder that the same agency who went after Americans because of their political views is going to be on the front lines of implementing and enforcing Obamacare in as early as next year. Which is an incredible fact. All right, I appreciate your views.
Let me go to the immigration question. As you know, today, a petition released a list of 150 prominent conservatives and groups came out against the Gang of Eight, of which you are a prominent member, the immigration reform bill. What are you thinking on this? I know you have wooed conservatives. You've done a good job, in my humble opinion. I happen to be with you on this issue, but many of my conservative brothers and sisters are not. Now you've got a list of 150 against you. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, I'm very respectful of the views that they have, and I share many of their views and concerns, of course, and we work together on every other issue that's before the United States. I think within the conservative movement in this country, there's a debate happening about what the immigration policy of the United States should be and the best way to address it. And if you saw in that letter that was released today, they acknowledge that there are many portions of it that they are in favor of. And primarily the complaint seems to be about the size and scope of the bill and the areas that it covers, and they think it does too much in one single piece of legislation. It's a concern that I've shared in the past and quite frankly continue to share. On the other hand, I think now is the time to act on this issue and get it solved, because we can't leave it the way it is. The status quo is just as bad, and so we've got to figure that out. And so certainly I think as we move forward now onto the floor of the Senate, in order for this thing to pass, now, one thing is to have a bill, another thing is to have a law that can pass the House and the Senate. There will have to be changes made to this bill, and particularly because people are saying the following to us. Here's what people are saying, a lot of conservatives. We are prepared to deal with the 11 million that are here now because we know that they're never going to go back, the vast majority of them. We're prepared to deal with that, but only if we take measures that ensure that we don't have a future wave of illegal immigration. I think that's a very reasonable request, a very reasonable position, and one that I think we need to be able to accomplish if we want this to become a law.
Well, a lot of people are talking about, and one of the key bullets in this petition to you is the idea that we're going to blow up, that the immigrants are going to blow up the entitlement system. And in fact, the Senate Judiciary Committee today voted to allow illegals who then somehow get legal status to start collecting welfare benefits, I think, right away. Now, that's a tough one, and that's something that conservatives don't want to swallow.
Well, I think actually the provision you're just talking about is the earned income tax credit, not the welfare provision, but the earned income tax credit, what they call tax welfare. And that's a big problem. I had a bill last year that addressed that problem, and I do think that needs to be addressed in this bill. I don't think we should allow people who have illegally violated the laws of the United States on immigration to have access to these programs. Now, the arguments they'll make is they become taxpayers, they should be able to use the full tax code. So I think that the merit in that is that, yeah, okay, let's examine the entire tax code and get rid of that provision, especially especially the way it's being abused. But I would say as far as this immigration issue is concerned, the issue you're talking about is not welfare, it's corporate welfare, tax welfare through the earned income tax credit, and I do think that needs to be addressed. I think the way it is in the bill now is one of the impediments to it passing.
But what about on the flip side of this issue? After all, some of us, including myself, old Reagan supply-siders, I think immigration is good for economic growth. I think immigration is about growth and opportunity. I think it's part of the soul of America. I haven't heard that kind of language from many of my pals. You know, if more people enter the labor force, Senator, if more people enter the labor force, which has gone stagnant, we'll grow more. And I don't see how America, which hasn't grown in a long time, should turn that opportunity down.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think one of the points to bear reminding is that there was a letter today by groups and individuals that were concerned about the immigration bill and opposed it. But just last week, there was a group of equally impressive conservative groups and individuals that were supportive of immigration reform, primarily for the reasons you've just outlined, and that is the economic benefits of it. Just today, an amendment was adopted in the Judiciary Committee that improves, for example, visas for the high-tech industry, which we know is critical for economic growth. But you're absolutely right. Virtually every group that's looked at immigration reform, except for one, has said that immigration reform would be a net positive for the economy of the United States. And that's what we expect the Congressional Budget Office to say and others. Ultimately, if it's not good for our economy, we shouldn't do it. And I do believe that immigration, legal immigration, done in an orderly fashion, in a controlled fashion, is a positive for the United States of America's economy.
Actually, the fiscal establishment, which is not dynamic, the CBO scored the 2006 immigration bill, didn't pass. They said it would create more revenues than spending because of the labor force, because of the economic growth benefits. And Doug Holtz-Eakin, a former CBO director, and Donald Marin, a former acting director, both agreed. More people in the labor force, more growth. That includes the brainiacs you talked about. It also includes the lower wage people. That it also means social mobility. You know, poor people go to school in this country, they can rise up the ladder of opportunity.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the reasons why I support immigration reform, and I support modernizing our legal immigration system. Look, it helps the housing market. You have people that are here in this country illegally now that are not paying taxes, that will be paying income tax and revenue to the government, but also be given the opportunity to improve themselves, to go up the economic ladder, to become net contributors to our economic life in this country as consumers, as buyers, but also in our business life and in our housing market and all these other elements. So look, again, legal immigration done right for this country with the proper enforcement mechanisms should be a net positive for the United States.
This is a soluble problem, Senator Rubio. This is a soluble problem, and thank you for your efforts. We appreciate you coming back on the Kudlow Report. All best.
Thank you.